Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, which I want to talk to you about the Reed NCFE's new baseline employability skills test, which we're calling BESTest. My name is Tom Miller. I'm the Managing Director of Reed NCFE, and welcome to this broadcast this morning. I am being hosted very kindly today by the College of North West London, and it's a sunny, hot, sticky day here in London. I hope it is nice wherever you are. During the course of this webinar, I'm going to work through a short series of PowerPoint slides. I'll probably try and keep you online, if I can keep your attention, for 35 minutes or so. During the course of that of the broadcast, feel free to ask any questions you want to, or observations that arise. You can do that by clicking on your screen. You should see a little yellow hand. If you want to click that, you can log your questions as we go, or your observations. Alternatively, right, if you can't do that or don't want to, right at the very end, I'll give you another set of contact details for following up, and we'll respond within 24 hours to those of you who log a question or an observation or an interest. Okay. So during the course of this webinar, I'm going to talk about this new diagnostic test to measure employability skills, and in particular how you might use this test as training providers to improve the progression into apprenticeships and traineeships. And as you will know, employability skills, if you were able to accurately measure employability skills, that measure would, I think, help you to make better matches of learners to opportunities, and better matches will in turn lead to better success rates. So there's sort of the business case for why, if you were persuaded by this diagnostic, you might want to use it and how it might improve your businesses. The test has been developed by my company, Reed NCFE, working alongside the University of Leeds. I'm sure that many of you know Reed NCFE. We do a lot of work in a range of different FE colleges across England, and that work includes work around employability skills provision, also apprenticeship provision, traineeships. So hopefully we know something about what we're saying, and also I hope we'll take it for granted that coming from the Reed stable, I'm also a board director with Reed, that we also know a thing or two about what makes someone employable or not. And we picked the University of Leeds to partner with because the University of Leeds is the UK's leading university for occupational psychology, and has developed a range of tests in different areas which are psychometric tests. And so we've ended up with a psychometric test for learners around employability skills. I will come back to that word psychometric in a moment. It's a bit heavy and sciencey, and I don't absolutely know what it means, but I will come back to it to give you more of a feel for it. But basically it doesn't apply to all tests, but it does apply to ours, and it's a testament to the quality and integrity of the test. So what is our test? Well, I'll try and explain what it's not. So our test is not a personality profiling test. So some of you may choose to use personality testing at the moment, for example, to determine whether your learner is an introvert or an extrovert. That's absolutely fine. That is useful to know, but our test doesn't seek to do that, doesn't duplicate or compete with it. Likewise, our test is not a careers suitability or preference test. So again, some of you may choose to use those types of tests. They're perfectly valid as parts of our careers IAG, but that's not what our test does. Our test does just what it says on the tin, which is it accurately measures the employability skills of your learners. And I would suggest to you that a measure of employability skills is an accurate measure of employability skills is more useful than a measure of personality or career preference, because ultimately it's the employability skills that will drive good matches by your organisation, and in turn will drive higher success rates. So this is right bang in the sweet spot of where your business, your commercial interests lie as training providers. So understanding where the employability skills are of your learners. What we're going to do in the webinar, I'm going to give you a little demo of the test itself. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. That would take too long. If you'd like to see the whole thing, we'd be very happy to do that. But we'll give you enough of a glimpse of it to see what it would look and feel like in the hands of your learners. And as I talk you through that, I'll explain why it's built the way it is, how it works in terms of the system set up, so on. Secondly, I'll give you a little demo of the test results, very importantly, and I want you to think about results in 2 dimensions. Dimension number 1 being the results that your learners see after they sit the test, so what does the test tell them? And then secondly, dimension number 2, other results do you as training providers get, and how might those results help you? Thirdly, I'm going to make some suggestions about how you might want to use this test for your apprenticeships and traineeships provision. And lastly, we'll look at some next steps. So that's what we're going to cover on. So straight into the test itself. The test comprises 30 questions. All the questions are absolutely, obviously, explicitly about employability skills. The questions will take your learners between 10 and 15 minutes, absolutely no more than 15 minutes to complete. And I mention that because actually the time is important, and we have tried to size this test in a way that allows you to easily fit it around whatever other types of tests and assessments you might want to run for your learners, either at the start of provision or alternatively at the end. So it's neat, compact, and easy to fit in. All the questions, all 30 questions, are what I've said here as situational workplace scenarios, by which I mean that the questions invite your learners to imagine that they are in such and such a situation in the workplace, and what would they do if. The alternative to that is that some of the questions are situational around applying or looking for positions at work. What does the test measure? Well, the test measures both hard skills and soft skills. Now, clearly I'm talking about employability skills. So what do I mean when I say hard employability skills? So it measures 4 of them, so here's what they are. Hopefully they'll make sense to you. And number 1, CVs. So to what extent do your learners understand what makes a good, compelling CV? Number 2, in terms of hard skills, job search techniques. So to what extent do your learners understand the range of different ways in which they may look for and secure positions at work? Thirdly, in terms of hard skills, interview skills. So to what extent do your learners understand how best to present themselves, a job interview, make good first impression, etc. And fourthly, workplace behaviours. So to what extent do your learners understand what are and are not appropriate behaviours to display in the workplace. So those are what we have called the 4 hard employability skills, and a learner who sits this test will get a score for each of those 4. In addition, the test measures soft skills, and as you know, as I know, as every employer tells you, they're more interested in a learner's soft skills than they are in their hard skills, sort of attitudes, behaviours, mindsets. So there's lots of different labels you can apply to soft skills. This test uses 6 labels, and I'll just tell you what they are, fairly self-explanatory. They are motivation, professionalism, resilience, organisation, initiative, and sociability. Now, when I was working with the university, clearly there, occupational psychologists are obsessed by the detailed definitions of these sorts of labels. There's quite a lot of science and research behind those 6 labels that we have picked. If you really want to see that, you'll be more than welcome. But hopefully, as I've read out those 6, and you'll see them in a moment when we come to reporting, they sort of make sense to you, and hopefully you're thinking, yeah, those are the right things that our learners should have. If they have those things, they'll be much more employable. The only one that I might want to just explain a wee bit is what I mean by the last one, sociability. So sociability is the label that we've chosen to describe interpersonal skills, sort of teamworking, communication, the ability to get on with people, etc. So that we've used sociability as the label for that. Now, we've been working with Leeds University for almost a year on this test. It's gone through a number of different iterations to get to the point it is today, and over the course of that year we've piloted those various iterations on almost 1,000 learners, and in doing that pilot we wanted to make sure the test didn't take too long to complete, so no more than 15 minutes. We wanted to make sure that it measured the right skills, those 4 hard skills, those 6 soft skills, but we also wanted to make sure that the test was suitable for most of your apprenticeship, traineeship learners, so effectively levels 1, 2 and 3 learners, and we're absolutely confident on the basis of the pilots that all of those levels, 1, 2 and 3, will be able to understand and interpret correctly the questions as they are written and the range of responses as we've written them. So I think that's good and reassuring. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that that we could call this a psychometric test. Now, why is that important? Well, this is an occupational psychology thing, and and I'm not an occupational psychologist, so I'm not really qualified to talk about this, but the key things that the criteria they look for is whether the test has validity, accuracy and reliability. All of those 3 words mean something slightly different, but for me, as a non-academic, for me, the rub is that the results that this test pumps out, you can be absolutely certain are true and accurate for your learner. So the learner can't fiddle the results, they can't guess the answers in a way that gives them a better or worse score. If they sit the test again, they won't get a different result. So it is a proper psychometric test, and therefore that's really important, because if you're going to plan your provision around the results of this test, if you're going to make decisions about which candidates you submit to which candidates you submit to employers based on the results of this test, it's pretty important, isn't it, that the results of the test can be relied upon. So they absolutely can. It's quite difficult to get a test to the point where it is a psychometric test, and so I labour that point really to help you understand how good quality and what sort of integrity the test has. Behind the test there sits a set of sort of mathematical algorithms to pump out the scores for those hard skills and for those soft skills, because the questions in themselves, as you'll see, don't have any obvious right or wrong answer. So there's a set of algorithms behind the questions and responses that produces the scores. Okay, so let's have a little look at, I think, 4 questions I'll show you. So there are 30 of these questions. They're all obviously about employability skills. So here's one. You are browsing the web and you come across a company that you would really like to work for. They do not have any job vacancies advertised and you can't see anything online. So this question pretty obviously is about job search. So how you respond to this question will influence your job search score. Job search being one of those 4 hard employability skills that I talked about. But look for yourself at the range of responses. This question and responses are also measuring some soft skills. So it's measuring your resilience and your initiative. So how easily are you deterred from your job search when you come upon an obstacle? How creative and imaginative are you in terms of fixing that and finding a workaround? So, and that is how you get those sorts of scores. So this question would drive a score for job search and also a score for resilience and initiative. Next example, to what extent do you agree that every time you try to find a suitable job, something stops you? This question is also about job search. So pretty obviously, employability skills question. So it'll feed into your job search score, but it will also address your motivation and your organisational skills. So how determined are you? How much have you planned to keep going? Next couple of examples. We're at a job interview. The interviewer explains that your role will be challenging at times. You still want the job, but this has started to worry you. How do you respond? So, this question is obviously about job interview, one of the hard employability skills. So it'll drive your score for job interviews. But it will also drive your score for motivation. So how motivated are you to get this job? And your professionalism. So how professional are you in terms of how you deal with the employer in this situation? What's your honesty and integrity like? So your professionalism is being tested here as well. And then lastly, as an example, you've been given a job interview. You don't know much about the company, so you're not really sure what to expect. It's making you nervous. What do you do? So again, this is a question about job interview. Pretty obvious, it's in the title of the question, and it's testing the soft skills of organisation. So what level of planning do you do? Initiative, so you get off your backside and do something about it to be as prepared as possible. So those are the sorts of questions that your learners would come across in the test itself. And as you'll have seen there, for all of the questions, there are no obviously right or wrong answer. And it's the range of responses and the combination of those 30 questions that then produces a set of scores that we'll come and look at in a moment when we come to look at the test results. Before I do that, just let me talk to you about where the test sits and how you access it. So the test is being hosted for us by a company called Qualtrics. Now, I suspect, like me, you've never heard of Qualtrics, but they happen to be the world's leading research software company, and they've got a client list that includes people like Wikipedia. So by comparison, Read NCFE is absolutely small fry. And we have picked Qualtrics quite deliberately because it's tried and tested. It has a platform that has proven itself to be very resilient to very high volumes of usage. So what we want to be absolutely assured about is that, let's imagine a situation in September where many thousands of learners are sitting this test on the same day, at the same time. What we want to avoid is a situation where the test runs slow, even worse, falls over and stops working altogether. So by going with Qualtrics, we absolutely have that assurance. So I tell you that not to bore you with the details, but to give you assurance that this is a stable, reliable, resilient platform. And it's easy to get at because you will set it up on your own portal. So that means that you can set BESTest, the baseline employability skills test, alongside whatever other raft of tests or assessments you want your learners to sit, either at the beginning or at the end of provision. And equally well, it's via your own portal that you'll be able to run the reports by learners, by frameworks, etc. So I tell you that just so as you have some comfort and confidence that the mechanics of the test are really good and won't let you down on the day. Let's have a look at results. Now, I said I want you to think about results in 2 dimensions. So one dimension being what the learner sees, and the other dimension being what the provider sees. So this page is the results that the learner would see. Now, just for the purpose of this slide, I've slightly moved the bottom half over to the right, but apart from that sort of configuration, this is exactly what your learner would see, and within a few moments of them completing the test, this is the result that would pump into their inbox for them to see. So what do they get? Well, this example is for, if you look at the top left-hand corner, I know it's very small type, but this is for a guy called John Smith. He's a business admin level 2 student, and you'll see that John gets an overall employability skills score of 54%. Now, the test doesn't tell John whether 54% is good or bad or indifferent, because we don't really want to make those sort of value judgments directly to John, but you will know, because you'll be able to compare John's result with other business admin level 2 students, other students that you have. So you'll know whether 54% is good, bad or indifferent. I suspect you'll find it's not that good. So John has some problems, so that's his overall score. More usefully, I think, for you, you will see that beneath that overall score there sits 4 blue slider bars and 6 red slider bars. Those 4 blue slider bars are the scores, the individual scores for those 4 hard employability skills that we talked about: CVs, job search, interviews, and workplace behaviours. The 6 red slider bars are the scores for those 6 soft skills that we talked about. So motivation, professionalism, resilience, organisation, sociability, and initiative. And you'll see that John, typical of most learners, has a range of scores across those 10 different metrics. If we just look, for example, at the blue slider bars, you'll see that John, his weaknesses are in interview technique and workplace behaviours. Now, if that was one of your learners, alarm bells might ring and saying there's no way we can send John out for a job interview because his interview techniques are poor, so he's unlikely to get the job. So that wouldn't be helpful. So let's do some more interventions to make sure that his interview techniques improve. And equally well, in terms of workplace behaviours, you might say to yourself, well, actually, John scored so low in workplace behaviours that even if he managed to secure the opportunity, he's unlikely to stick at it because his workplace behaviours are likely to let him down. You might say to yourself, well, therefore, I'm going to do a pile more work with John around his understanding of appropriate workplace behaviours to make him more employable, to make him a better match and more likely to be a high success rate for me. Then in terms of his personal qualities, you'll see again a range of highs and lows, but you'll see that John is low in resilience and sociability. So resilience, let's talk about problem solving, one part of that. So in terms of the work that you might want to do with John, therefore, you might want to plan more problem solving activities into John's provision so that his resilience improves and that he becomes more likely to be a good match and more likely to be a success, to be a sticker in the placement that you give. Sociability, really low score for sociability. This is interpersonal skills. So again, depending on the type of job that John is going to be going for, you might want to do some work with John around his sociability. So that might involve, for example, giving John the opportunity to work more in teams, perhaps asking him to do some presentations. So you can see how these scores would really influence some of the decisions you make about matches to opportunities, and also some of the decisions you make about what provision you put in place for John. And that's exactly what we want you to think. And John sees this, and we have spent quite a bit of time and given a lot of thought to how we present these results, because we are pretty confident that these results are presented to John in a format that require no further explanation. So you'll see there is some text to the left of each of those slider bars to explain what each of them mean very, very briefly and succinctly. But we've written this in a way that there's no need for you or someone in your organisation to sit down with John and say, right, John, let me tell you what your results are. You might want to do that, but you don't have to. The results will stand and make sense to John on their own, just as he receives it. So, dimension 1. Dimension number 2 is what results do you see as a training provider? Well, of course you see this result as well. It's exactly the same as John sees it. What else can you see? Well, you can see results by framework. So you might. So this is an example for engineering level 2. This could be, depending how you want to run this. This could be students who are pre-apprenticeship doing provision prep for engineering level 2 apprenticeships, or it could be students who are on apprenticeships, or it could be both, however you want to do it. But you'll see their overall score is 70%. So compared to John's 54%, this is a bit more encouraging. You might think, this is pretty good. But you'll be able to, if you were doing that, you'll be able to benchmark your engineering level 2 score against your some of your construction frameworks, say, whatever else you might do. So you can benchmark one framework against another, 1 year's cohort against last year's, which is really useful because that might allow you to decide where your resources and time are best invested. So you can put them at the most needy groups of learners. So what does this tell you below the 70% headline score? Well, the 4 blue bar charts here are for the hard employability skills. The 6 red bar charts are for the 6 soft skills. So this tells you that actually these engineering level 2 students are pretty genned up on how to behave in the workplace, but their interview skills are rubbish. So they'd be great once they got there, but they're unlikely to get there because their interview skills are poor. So wouldn't that be really useful to know? Because that would allow you to say, I'm going to do a pilot work around this cohort to improve their interview skills. Secondly, across the piece, looking at their soft skills as a group of students, resilience and initiative are their weaknesses. So they're really motivated, so they definitely want to work and be in the labour market, but their resilience, their initiative, so their ability to deal with setbacks, take responsibility for their own work, etc., is poor. So you should decide to put in place some provision to address those particular areas of weakness. Bear in mind this is a psychometric test, so these results are true. So it's not just a 50-50 chance of them being true. These results are true. This is what this cohort is like. So you can plan your provision really accurately and reliably based on this data. So you can run results by framework, you can run results by employer. For example, you might want to do that to compare one employer against another. So here we have an employer called Any Care Limited. I know it's in a really small type, but overall score 60%. So let's assume that these are all on-program apprentices. You might be thinking, gosh, 60% score for Any Care Limited. That is maybe not that encouraging, because that score will be a predictor of your success rates. So 60%, you might be getting worried that your success rate for Any Care Limited is not going to be that good. What could you do about that? Well, let's look at the subset scores that sit beneath that. So you'll see that on their 4 hard skills, it's their interview techniques that are poor. Their workplace behaviours are pretty high. So you might say to yourself, well, I don't really care about interview techniques because they're already in work, so that's fine, leave that. Bob's your uncle. But this is Any Care Limited, so it's a care provider of some kind. Look, their motivation scores and their sociability scores are really low compared to the other soft skills. So I know it's a generalization, but please allow me run with it. for that particular session, for that particular sector, motivation to work there and interpersonal skills are really, really key determinants of success. And if that cohort of students in any care limited are not really very motivated and not really good on their interpersonal skills, I suspect you will have a problem with your success rates. So you would then be doing some work with students, I think, even though they're on programme, to improve their motivation and their sociability. And then you'll be able to see that for any care limited, now we've used the illustration here, these red bar charts are saying, so let's suppose that any care limited are offering two types of framework. They're offering social care and childcare. Well, actually, it's the childcare students you need to worry more about than health and social care. So wouldn't that be really useful for you to know? That's the sort of data that I don't think you would have at the moment, and certainly that you wouldn't have in terms of being absolutely accurate and reliable. So you can run test results by employer. You can run test results for you as a provider as a whole. So here you have it, for for your board, your leadership team planning, what provision you have, what you do. So your overall score is 70%. Not too bad, not too good. Where are you weak? You're weak in your interview techniques. Really good in your workplace behaviours. So so don't spend a lot of time on teaching people how to behave in the workplace. You'll be far better spending that time teaching them how to actually secure a position, what their interview technique is going to be like. Equally well, really encouraging in terms of motivation and professionalism. What a good cohort you have of students, but resilience, sociability, initiative not quite so high. And so that's where you might want to concentrate your efforts, because those are key determinants of employability, and those areas of weakness will drag down your ability to match candidates to opportunities and will drag down your overall success rates. So you could do something about that, which would improve the number of starts you have and improve your sustainment and success rates. And then equally for a provider as a whole, you can get a cut by your different frameworks. So you'll see that some are better than others. So on this illustration, accountancy and travel and tourism are the areas which are most needy in terms of employability skills provision. So you might think, I'm going to spend more of my time looking at those students than perhaps business admin or media and IT. So that would really allow you as a leadership team plan what you do and where you do it, with which learners, in what quantities, etc. Really good for your planning, and that planning will drive more matches, better matches, and higher success rates. Okay, so I said, so that's the reporting done. I said I'd make some suggestions about how you might want to use BESTest in your businesses. So these suggestions aren't just my own wild imaginings. These suggestions are also based on feedback I've had from conversations with providers off the back of previous webinars we've done and initial sort of conversations about using this test going forward. So, and our recommendation is that you should think about using BESTest both at the start of provision as part of initial assessment, and then again at the end of provision. So why would you do that? Just canter through this fairly quickly. We've touched on lots of this already. So why would you do it at the start? Well, because pretty obviously it's going to establish a baseline position for your learners' employability skills, a baseline position that is accurate, objective, so it's not based on guesswork or on subjectivity. Now, some of you will do a lot of work at the moment to try to establish an accurate baseline position, but at the beginning of initial assessment stage, you don't know the learner well enough, so there'll be an element of guesswork and there'll be an element of subjectivity, so whoever does it will be making some judgments. This test, BESTest, is scientific, objective, psychometric. It's the truth about employability. It will then allow you to decide on suitability or not, as the case may be. So, this learner's applied for health and social care, provision, but their scores on, let's say, motivation and sociability are so bad that I don't think that's the right career choice for them. So allow you to decide on suitability or not. It would allow, because think back to that report that I showed you for John Smith, the learner's report. Some of your learners are, let's say, less engaged in your provision for employability skills than they jolly well ought to be. So just go back to John Smith sits a test, gets a report, scientific, professional, that says, John, you're strong in this and you're weak in the other areas. That really increases John's buy-in for the enrichment provision that you are going to put in place for him, because there is some evidence that actually he has a need there. So it won't work in every case, obviously, but it will improve overall the buy-in of your learners for the types of provision that you're doing for them. And equally well, if you do it at the start of the learner's journey, it will allow you to plan your interventions to make sure that what you put in place is relevant, tailored to each learner's own weaknesses and or their career goals. So that, all of that added together seems to be a pretty compelling set of reasons for why you might want to use BESTest at the start of provision. Why would you want to do it at the end? Well, it would provide yet further evidence of achievement. So an achievement is important. They'll get the qualification at the end of it, but this would be evidence of achievement in terms of their employability skills. So to lay on top of their achievement of vocational skills. It allows you to give some evidence. If you do it at the end of provision, it allows you evidence, cause and effect. So, here is the problem, here's what I did, and here's the result I achieved, or not, as the case may be. So cause and effect, and allows you evidence that actually the interventions you're doing on employability are actually working. They are actually improving someone's employability. Or alternatively, they're not, which would be equally useful to know. It allows you measure distance travelled. So, if you do it at the beginning and at the end, here's the score at the beginning, here's the score at the end, that the difference equals distance travelled. How beautiful would that be for when Ofsted roll up and ask you to evidence what you're doing in terms of the effectiveness of your employability skills provision, all this stuff around a learner development and progression and distance travelled, which has become a real theme in recent Ofsted inspections. I think this is really neat and useful, and so it would give Ofsted some evidence that they want, but you're not just ticking a box for the sake of it. It is really useful for you to know this stuff as well, as we've talked about. And lastly, it would help inform progression choices. So, so for example, think back to that health and social care set of students. If at the end of provision, you had a cohort of students that had really low scores on sociability and motivation, I think you could use that wisely to help inform progression choices. So for example, you might be saying to that cohort of students that they're not quite ready for the labour market yet, they need to come back and do some more provision. Or alternatively, you might be saying to that cohort or some of those students that their personalities just aren't suited for a career in health and social care, and they should think about something else. Really good evidence upon which to inform and base progression choices at the end of provision. So that's why we think it would be useful for you to think about using the test at the beginning and at the end of your learner journey. Sorry, clicked on something wrong there. Next steps, just very quickly. So there's a brand new product. It's going to be used in anger over the course of the next academic year. It is available now, so if you want this now for cohorts of learners, very welcome. If you know anything about psychometric tests, things like Savin, Holdsworth, Myers-Briggs, you may know that they are phenomenally expensive, anything from £30 to £50 per test. So we've priced our test at a level that I hope you will think is much better value. So we priced it at £2 per learner, and for that price, so for £2, each learner can sit the test twice. So you can do it at the beginning and at the end. So effectively £1 per test, but we're bundling it as £2 per learner. And of course, for that price, you get all of that information about the individual learners, and then you get that comparison stuff between learner 1 versus learner 2, between employer 1 versus employer 2, different levels, different frameworks, etc., all of which will help you in your business to make better matches and to have better provision, and therefore to have better success rates. Just looking ahead a year from now, what we expect once we've had lots and lots of learners do this is that we will then offer national benchmarking comparisons, so you'll be able to compare your engineering level 2 students with engineering level 2 students nationally. And I think that would be very useful. So, you know, at the point of entry, are your level 2 engineering students more or less needy in employability skills than national averages? And are your students more needy in interview skills, in resilience, in initiative, etc., than national learners? So that would allow you to do that. And also, I think what would be interesting is it will allow you to compare your distance travelled versus national distance travelled. So you'll know whether or not you're doing a better or job or typical, better or worse or typical job with your learners than national averages. And I think that will really help inform the quality of your provision. So that really is the end of this webinar. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you've found it interesting and enjoyable. On the screen just now, as I said, I would have put up the contact details from my colleague Stephen King. So please feel free to email Stephen or phone him with your questions, comments, observations, requests for follow-up. You can still make that contact through the sort of the yellow hand icon on your screen if you want to do that. But in a moment I'll shut up and leave this screen up for a moment or two whilst you guys log off, so you can scribble down Stephen's contact details. So, but just finally, thank you again for your time and your attention this morning, and I wish you a very pleasant rest of the day. So thank you very much.